My name is Paul Sheeler. My wife and I and our son own Evergreen Acres Christmas Tree Farm in Auburn, Pennsylvania. We are about 50 miles east of Harrisburg, about 20 miles north of Reading, about 30 miles west of Allentown. If any of you are familiar with the Cabela's store in Pennsylvania, my farm is 7 miles north of the Cabela's store. Okay, so you have a general idea where we're at. I am third generation. My son is fourth generation Christmas tree producer. Our farm was started in 1945 when my father got out of the service, and the sole function of the Christmas tree farm was to have enough money to put a turkey on the Christmas table. That is how we got started. Now we are shipping several thousand. We're mostly a wholesale operation. We're shipping several thousand trees into New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and most of our customers are in southeastern Pennsylvania. We run a small retail lot, not choose and cut, but a retail lot that we cut and bring in. And the reason for that is where the home farm is located, we are in a frost pocket, which we'll be talking a little bit more about. And we have heavier clay soils, and I'm very limited to what I can grow there. Whereas on 3 other farms that are all at higher elevations, I have better soils, I'm out of the frost pocket. Not that I can't get nipped by frost, late spring frost, but it can happen, but I'm not as much of a problem as I am down in the valley. The main farm we own, the other 2 farms we lease. And that's a whole nother ball game in leasing, but it's a good way of going. If you want to get into this business and not have the land investment, it's a good way of going. Also my background, I worked for Penn State Cooperative Extension for 28 years, and my specialty area of education that I taught other growers was Christmas tree production. When I first came to the county, in Carbon County where I worked, we had 145 Christmas tree growers and 3 dairy farms. That's how big the tree industry was. That has since then gone by the wayside. There's the number of growers, what's facing the industry is gray hair. And the younger generation not willing or wanting to take it on. And we're seeing fewer and fewer growers. Okay? Let's get moving here. Why do I want to get into this business? You're going to get rich quick? I don't think so. I don't think that better not be your goal. Okay? This might be one of your goals, is putting some open land to good use. I was talking to some folks here earlier about here in New York and in Pennsylvania, there's preferential tax assessment for land use. I know in New York, you must have it in some form of agriculture. Christmas trees would fit that bill. In Pennsylvania, we don't need it. We can roll it in a program called Clean and Green. It does not have to be an active production as long as there's more than 10 acres and you can have a preferential tax assessment on it. Next. Okay. Something to do in your retirement years. Okay. I think kind of what you two were talking about here. All right. It's a good pastime, but it has to be a passion. It has to be a passion. Just don't look at it as a job because you'll probably fail. Keep going. Some people like to play in the dirt. Some people like to garden. Well, this is a big form of gardening. Go ahead. Some people want the money to go to exotic places. And this is my passion, is hunting trips. That's my son in Idaho in, I guess that was about 2010 when he and I went to Idaho. Some people want the money to put their kids through, get an education for their kids. All of these things I have done with income from the Christmas tree industry. But whatever it is, let's do it right, okay? And I hope that's why you're here. When I say do it right, by doing things wrong and putting inferior product on the market, it's not a better way of chasing the real tree buyer into an artificial tree. And I will probably, when we talk a little bit more here, I'm going to be very critical of people raising spruce, namely Norway spruce, and white spruce because of their potential of needle drop. Now, as we keep trying to move the market earlier and earlier, closer to Thanksgiving, and the trees are just not made to put up with that kind of period of time in a home. And then how many times can Susie Homemaker put up a real tree when on Christmas morning they have needles all over the floor? So I am kind of critical of that, and that's what I'm getting at. Do it right, raise the right species, raise a high quality product. You are competing with that artificial tree, and believe it or not, you're also competing with about a third of the families in the country not putting a tree up at all. You've got to try to capture some of that market. Go ahead. Okay? And as good as you can be, poor genetics or poor weed control can lead to problems. We'll talk about this tree a little bit more when we talk about genetics. This is a top off a 6-foot tree. I just cut it off the other day. Isn't that beautiful? That's genetics for you. Bad genetics. Genetics plays a big part in this industry. Hopefully we'll learn some of that to try to get the best genetics that you can buy. Go ahead. Okay. Here's our goal. There's one of my fields of Fraser. Actually, that whole field was clear cut in one season, everything out. And another field of Douglas, your goal here. Keep going. Another field of Douglas. Young laid out, they're young Frasers. You really can't see it with the light. Now, yeah, you can go to the next one. With this one here, you can see all of my Frasers are produced under trickle irrigation. Not necessary, but when I'm paying $1.30, $1.40 for a transplant, I sure hate to see losses like this. Now, the losses you see in here, even under good management, happen. And on this particular field, the losses were due to soil compaction. I insisted that I get those seedlings planted at a certain time when the field was too wet, and the soil compaction from the tractor just plain killed them because there's not enough balance of air and moisture in that soil. It was too much moisture and packed soil from the tractor tires, and I had heavy losses in there. And in a case like that, believe it or not, heat will take out Fraser fir. Too intense of a heat. Go ahead. That is heat. Losses due to heat. Those are Frasers planted where Frasers shouldn't be planted. When we talk about site selection, it looks like a nice site, nice slope there, but it's a Berks, what we have, it's a Berks shaly silt loam soil that you can get 4 inches of rain and I can drive in that field with a tractor the next day. That's how well drained that soil is. Yeah, it's well drained, but to a point that it dries out quickly, and heat with a west-facing slope smoked all those trees. So even experienced growers have losses. Go ahead. Requirements of the Christmas tree business is land, money, physical endurance, emotional stability and strength, and knowledge to try to do it right. That's what we're going to try to go over some of these things. Go ahead. Okay, talk a little bit about the land. The land must be suitable, must have preferably some slope to it. There's nothing wrong with flat land, but flat land has a tendency of maybe being a little bit poorer drained. Water may settle in places like that. We have to watch out for frost pockets. Again, usually low areas. And what happens, some of these trees will break bud early, and they'll be in these frost pockets, and you get a late spring frost and just smokes all the new growth right off them. And that happens repeatedly, and the trees never develop. Some trees will recover from a frost, but repeated frost damage, they end up being garbage. Okay? Water holding capacity, like I said, that Berkshire silt loam soil I had, it drained very quickly. Raising Douglas or Fraser or concolor fir on that site, oh, they're as happy as a clam there. I put Fraser on that site, they just die. And rocks, there's nothing wrong with rocks as long as they're small enough that you don't climb it over them with the equipment and tearing up your mowers with rocks. And a water source is nice. Years for my one farm, I was tanking water. For years we tanked water to that farm for our spraying operations. I had big tankers haul water up there and spray and go haul more water. And now we've put a well in up there, and that's where I run my trickle irrigation out of, and it just has made life so much simpler. So a water source is nice. Go ahead. Your land, you're going to buy it, you're going to lease it, and is rental possible? And if the land is worth a little bit more, if you can rent it, because I don't know what ag land is bringing. What is ag land bringing here in New York per acre? If I wanted to rent and put corn in, anybody have an idea? What's that?
Probably 1,500, 2,000.
Per year?
Yep. Oh, that would be the market price.
For sale?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, market price. Okay. What about to lease land? If I wanted to plant corn on your land this year, what would you charge me? I'm thinking someplace in the $50, $60 per acre per year. Does that sound fairly reasonable?
I'm only getting a little high.
I would bet
Around 20.
You're only getting 20? I think you could be higher.
I bet most of the deals are for the tax deduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the majority of the deals.
Okay. But for me, I leased a good bit of land, and I'm not afraid to pay $100 per acre per year. Okay? But start doing the math on this, folks. Plants per acre, cost per plant, start adding it all up. But the landowner, he's getting a good money for his land, $100 per acre per year, but I'm insisting on a 10-year lease. So I'm tying his land up for 10 years. So there has to be a benefit to the landowner. So that's why you're willing to pay more. And $100 per acre per year is dirt cheap when you think what the potential of that land is. Okay, go ahead. Okay, money. Land may be your biggest cost. If it's available, if it's available, you can buy it or lease it. Now here's an interesting thing that's very important, especially to new growers. In my job as an extension agent, I saw so many people make this mistake. I can buy 5,000 two-year-old seedlings for X amount of dollars. And for the same amount of money, I would only get 1,000 if I was buying transplants. And we'll be talking about seedlings and transplants, what they are. And I'll get 5 times more trees for the same amount of money. But your survival, I'm telling you now, it will not be there. And you will be very disappointed, especially as a new grower, with dealing with these small plants. Because I know new growers are going to have weed control issues. We'll try to work with you on that. You're going to have weed control issues. You will lose those little tiny plants in the grass and the weeds. Then you try to work around them. Then you whack them off with the weed whacker, or you mow them off with the lawnmower. It's called mower blight. And you do not get ahead by playing it cheap in the beginning. My opinion is I will buy I'm not saying the most expensive, the very best plant I can buy. I want the very best plant I can buy with the best genetics I can get my hands on. And it will pay for itself in the end. Okay? And we'll talk a little bit later about genetics between this tree and this tree. Planted the same year in the same field. 2 different nurseries. Okay. And talking about money, this project is minimum of 8 years for the new grower, with money going out and out and out with no money coming in. It is a big, big investment. Okay? In the beginning, you can get by with smaller and smaller equipment, but eventually you're going to have to get into bigger equipment as you get more trees. Again, this is money continued. These are all pieces of my own equipment. Mist blowers. I actually, as of right now, I own 3 mist blowers. And we have a total of 6 smaller tractors, Kubotas or Massey Fergusons. Go ahead. The risk, if making money is your primary objective, there are safer and easier ways to do it. The cost to get established vary greatly with land, equipment, size, and the availability of free family labor. Is there such a thing? I have a 6-year-old granddaughter who we're already teaching to shear, and she says, "Daddy, are you going to pay me?" Says to my son. And he gives her $2 for going out with us in the afternoon. And she's already has her hand out. All right? Next. Okay. Physical endurance. It is hard work, seasonally intense, and often in lousy weather conditions. We're butt pruning here. There's my son right there. We have a unit. It's an air compressor mounted on a 3-point hitch of one of those small tractors. We can run 2 air lines on it and pneumatic air clippers. And you can see where the bottom of these trees have been trimmed off here. He's out there butt pruning that. And that was one miserable day.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
Just so you know, when Paul and I took over the farm, we had $350 in the checking account. We did not have this equipment. Our fields were not like this. So where you're starting, we started there.
That's a good point.
We were engaged, and I was out hand planting. We didn't have equipment. We were planting weeds up to like this. So, you know, they didn't do the weed control and everything. So, you know, everything that he's telling you, we've done. We've gone through. So that was back in late 70s, early 80s. So it's taken us time to build up to where we're at. So, you know, don't get discouraged, but no, it's hard work. But, you know, you can't give up right away because we've done it all. You know, we've lost the trees, and so we've worked through it.
Okay. Seasonally hard work. What a lot of people don't understand is we work all year long on these trees to make a whole year's income in 3 or 4 weeks. You know how intense for like a wholesale operator such as myself, how intense that 3 weeks is? 4 weeks? You know, we're still working at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and at 3:30, 4 o'clock the next morning, we're jockeying equipment around to get it into fields for that's day's harvest and whatever field we're cutting out of. Moving hay wagons and this and that into place. And in between there, we're maintaining equipment. And that lasts for 3 or 4 weeks. It's intense, real intense. Go ahead, okay? Emotional stability. You have this dream. But the reality is poor planting stock, insects, diseases, deer and rodents, mower blight, which we talked about. Keep going. The reality continues. Herbicide misapplication, vandalism, theft, it all happens. Drought, weather, fire, liability, and equipment breakdown. How about it, Ted? You've been through this, haven't you? All of it's true, isn't it?
You bet.
Okay. The reality continues. Shearing mistakes, market gluts. Now, I don't know if any of you heard Brad Edwards talking yesterday that a few years back that there were Fraser fir available for $2 and $3 on the stump in North Carolina, going back about 8, 10 years ago. Okay, that's a marketing glut. We had a major glut here in the Northeast. I'm thinking late 80s, early 90s, where we were having trouble moving trees because there were so many trees on the market. Okay. The other thing on there is availability of labor. If you're trying to rely on high school kids, I like to give high school kids a job. Trouble is they tell you when they're going to work. Okay? They're involved in so many activities and so on and so forth. And people just don't want to work anymore because this is very, very labor intensive when we're in our harvest. I had one gentleman this year, 45 years old, 6'2". His biceps were as big around as my thighs. He lasted 1 day. He says, "This is too much work." And I just had him feeding 6-foot concolors into the baler. You know? It's hard to get good labor. Okay, go ahead. Okay, the knowledge. Type of Christmas tree farm you want to have. What I mean by type is it going to be a wholesale? choose and cut? Are you going to do balled and burlap? Because all these are factors that go into and how to lay out the farm. We have to talk a little bit about site selection. Everybody would raise beautiful Frasers like this, or a lot of these other exotic firs, but we have to match those species to the site. Just because you have land doesn't mean everything grown, and nothing likes wet feet, period. Okay? When we get into species selection, we have to pick 10 years out what the market demand is going to be. Okay? What other industry has to do that? Has to plan 8, 10 years out of where the market demand is going to be. And sometimes we fall short. Okay? Site adaptability. Okay? Keep going. Okay. Variety selection. That's why I have all these different varieties up here. We have to take into consideration growth rates. There's one, I don't see it handy here right now. Yeah, here. Beautiful tree. Cork bark fir. Beautiful tree. You're not going to make money with cork bark fir unless you're retailing these things for about $150 a piece, because it takes about 12 to 14 years to get a 7 to 8 foot tree. Okay? If you're willing to wait that long for kind of return on your dollar, fine and dandy, and you better be getting your money for them. Okay? We're looking for maybe some with disease and insect resistance. There are some Douglas firs out there are a little bit more resistant to some insects and some to disease, but the trees themselves develop into garbage. We can't get that blend. Percentage of marketable trees. That field with those trees yielded 95% number ones and premiums, with 5% number twos and 0 culls. 0. This field, on the other hand, yielded about 10% number ones, about 50 or 60% number twos, and out of 1,000, there's over 200 trees that look like this laying in the field that we cut to be hauled away and burned. Okay? So genetics plays a role in here, and you're looking at marketable trees. And also when we look at some of the exotics, hey, they're great, they're beautiful, they're fun to raise. But a lot of them, you get some beautiful trees, but the percentages at this stage of the game are not there. With some of the exotics, we are with them with genetic selection where we were with Fraser and Douglas 30, 40, 50 years ago. And we're trying to catch up to that with some of the exotics. And then, of course, hardiness. Go ahead. Okay. Site preparation. We want to look at fertility and weed control. Yeah, site preparation and weed control. Those of you who are just starting out should be thinking about, let's say you want to plant this spring. You ordered, your seedlings are on order. Your weed control program should have started last fall. Hate to tell you that. You should have mowed that field off last July, allow it to reflush, and then smoke the field with Roundup. Kill everything dead. Now what you have a lot of perennial weeds that are laying there dormant. You come along in your spring and you plant your seedlings in nice straight rows and you pamper those things, whoom, up come all these perennial weeds all around your plants. And your pre-emergent herbicides won't pick them up. Pre-emergence is pre-emergence. Okay? When you have perennial weeds, they're already there. They're not emerging from seed, they're already there. So your herbicides won't pick them up. Okay? Planting, size and age of plant, which I mentioned a little bit before. Time of planting, my opinion is get them in as early as you can in the spring, that the soil can be worked. Spacing, and that varies on how you want to run your farm. On a wholesale basis, I'm 5 by 6. If I was running a choose and cut farm, the smallest I would be 6 by 6. And on some of our Fraser fields, and I'm not recommending this by any means, we have experience and we know what we're doing in this particular case. We've narrowed our Frasers down to 4.5 by 6. I still want 6 feet between the rows to get my small tractors down, but I've been able to narrow them down, and that's still in experimental stages. Those trees are up that high right now, and it's looking good. It gives me an extra 10% more per acre, and with Frasers, I mentioned that they like it a little cooler, and the sooner we can get a canopy of branches down there to shade the ground, keeps the ground a little bit cooler. And when they're a little bit closer, we can cool that ground just a little bit better, and it makes them a little bit more thrifty. Spacing and planting depth. Planting depth, I was on a farm one time as an extension agent, and I saw a whole field of Douglas fir dead because they were planted about that much too deep beyond where they were planted in the nursery, and it killed them. Go ahead. Yeah, there's deer control. Maintenance, weed control, fertility management, insect control, diseases, rodent control, and of course deer control. Those are some nice bucks we took out in Montana. But the deer control, if you have deer issues, you are going to be very limited to what you can grow. And if you don't want to get discouraged, you better consider fencing. Yeah.
On the last slide, row spacing, how do you do it, Paul?
Row spacing?
Row spacing, do you stagger them?
No, we plant them on the square.
Okay.
What he's talking about, you can plant them like this down the row, or you can offset them like that. You can do it either way. So you can go this way or this way. There's 2 ways of planting them. I like them this way. I'm spraying with a mist blower, okay? As I come down my row here with the tractor, I am blowing in here. If I have this staggered like this, and let's say I'm coming down here blowing in this way, I get this one, and this tree starts blocking my spray pattern. You see what I'm talking about? Yep. That's why I put mine on the square. You don't have to, and as we talk a little bit later on, the way you lay out a field, you better be taking a lot of considerations of how you plan to spray, because it has a lot of bearing how you lay the field out. And getting back to deer control, how many of you think you have or are going to have deer issues? Yeah, look at that. You better start thinking about fencing. Yeah, everybody's, oh, it's so expensive. Question.
What about deer repellent?
How many times do you want to go out and reapply it in the wintertime? Trouble is with deer, I can put deer repellent on with my mist blower. But once I get it winterized and have antifreeze in a sprayer, do I want to go out every couple of weeks and winterizing my sprayer? And these deer repellents just last a few weeks until they get rained off. They work. Yeah. Okay? How much do you want to apply? Yeah.
Are there species that deer like less and more?
Oh, I don't know about less, but there's trees they like more. As I'm learning more about some of the exotics, deer love Frasers. But they'll walk through a patch of Frasers to get to some Turkish and Nordman. They'll just walk right through them to get to the Turkish and Nordman. Okay? Yeah.
Paul, what about grouping by species or age?
What's that?
What about grouping trees by species or by age? I know, clearly spraying is going to be a concern.
Well, that leads me to think about a couple different things. When you're saying grouping by age, automatically I think of stump planting, okay? I'm not a firm believer in stump planting. What stump planting is, you have a crop of trees, you come along and you cut trees, and then the next spring you come along and you plant a tree by that stump. Now in the field you have trees this big, and now you have a baby right next to it. Now, on people with limited land, okay, that's fine and dandy. The trouble with that is, eventually, the rows start going like this. Because where you want to put that tree, next to the stump, there's a root. So we move the tree here, we move it there, and all of a sudden your rows start going like this. The other thing is, they block your spray pattern. You have a big tree here in the aisle, I'm going down this way with the tractor, a tree here, and I got a baby back here. That tree doesn't get a bit of spray because that big tree blocks the spray pattern. I am a firm believer, even on a choose and cut basis, of clear cutting. Everything in, everything out. It makes it so much easier to manage. You can manage your soils, your fertility. so much easier if everything in, everything out. Okay. Harvesting and storage. We store every one of our trees inside. From the time a tree is cut till it's in storage is probably less than 2 hours. Everything under roof. We don't believe in leaving any trees outside, cutting and baling, and then when we load trucks, we use elevators. There's different methods of that. But when you're laying out your farm, all of these things have to be taken consideration of where these are going to go, kind of before you really put any plants in the ground. How are you going to move these things around? Where are your access roads and stuff going to be? Where is your hard deck surface? You don't pull a tractor trailer in the field to load it unless you plan to have a wrecker standing by to pull it out. Okay? You have to have hard surfaces for some of these things. And those things have to be planned ahead of time. Go ahead. Okay? How are you going to market your trees? Wholesale or retail? Or choose and cut? Or balled and burlapped? All different possibilities. I'm not going to talk much about balled and burlapped. That's a different operation. But those of you who are raising some spruce, and I mentioned before, I'm down on certain varieties of spruce because of their needle keeping properties, but there's no reason why you can't be growing them for balled and burlap. If anybody asked me what would be my favorite tree, evergreen tree for a balled and burlap tree, I would tell them a Norway spruce. If they asked me what's my least favorite tree for a cut tree, I'd say a Norway spruce. Okay. We got any questions before we move on? Yeah.
How do you deal with the stumps after you harvest?
How do you deal with the stumps after you harvest? There's a lot of different methods there. This catalog was laying upstairs. The gentleman didn't show up. This is Tree Equipment Design. He's a guy down in Ringgold in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania. He builds a lot of the neat equipment. Okay. How do I do it? We do it all different ways. I have a set of forks on the front of a skid loader that we can pop them out. Now, you try to dig a Scotch pine stump out, I can probably do 100, 150 an hour, popping them out with the skid loader. If I try to do a Fraser stump, I'm down to about 25 an hour because the fibrous root system on the Fraser fir, you can't get the dirt off it. So that limits it. Now, if the stump sits for a year, they pop right out. Okay, because all those fibrous root systems rot off. I also have that one slide there. We said some people like to play in the dirt and had that International tractor. That was our Northwest rotary tiller. We put our lime and fertilizer down right on a stump field and just rototill it. It's a heavy-duty tiller. It'll just grind up stumps and everything, and then you can go right through and plant right through that. And then there's another method. This Tree Equipment Design makes a stump grinder. It's a hydraulic motor with a revolving wheel with tungsten carbide teeth, mounts in the front of a skid loader, and you go right down the road, zzzt, 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 and just do stumps. I don't know what the number I've done per hour. I just know in a 5-hour period, I did a field of 1,600 in a 5-hour period, grinding them up. And then what we did, we came along and planted between the rows of stumps. No tillage was necessary there. Okay, answer your question about stumps.
Yes.
All right. Anything else? Yeah.
The tree you had there, and what about the wreath making, and would you cut those down to height?
Well, I have so much slash in the field when I'm done harvesting. I got all the beautiful greens I need. I don't need stuff like that to go, because we do not butt prune our Frasers. Okay, I butt prune them at harvest, putting a handle on them, mainly so I can get them with jaws on them for the baler. But I have all that slash in the field, and we sell that stuff by the tons, okay? Whereas I don't, even this growth is all gnarly and little tiny short pieces of growth. It's just bad genetics. Yeah, could it be used for wreath making? Sure. And if you have cold trees, you should be trying to get something out of it. That, for me, it doesn't pay for that.
When you say bad genetics, so you're tracing that back to the nursery that those...
Or the seed source. Can't blame the nursery as much as where he got his seed from. And sometimes there's just no way around it.
How do you know?
You don't. Now, there are some nurseries that advertise genetically superior stock, that they have done some genetic selection. They have their own seed orchards in of this genetically superior stuff, and it's a start. But when a nursery goes out and buys their seed, you don't know where it comes from. Give you a quick example. Douglas fir grows all through the Rocky Mountains, okay? And some of these seedsmen will hire Indian tribes to go out and gather seed. Well, what happens, makes it easy for the Indians to go out there and steal from squirrel caches. Squirrels go up the tree, they cut these cones down, they fall down, and they put mountains of cones on the bottom of a tree. That's their cache of seeds, because they eat the seeds. One thing you got to learn, the trees that are producing the most cones are the ugliest trees. The trees that are producing the fewest cones, for some reason, are the prettiest trees. So you go out and you gather all this seed up, and what are you buying? You're buying squirrel caches. People don't realize that.
So is there a list of, so if I threw a name of the grow of the...
Maybe after the meeting, you and I talking on the side. I don't want to get up here. I don't want to be up here promoting one nursery over another. That's not what I want to do. Because all these nurserymen are my friends. Okay?